All right, folks, welcome back to GMA3. We are joined now by the senior senator from the great state of Minnesota.
She's the author of this new memoir entitled The Joy of Politics. Senator Amy Klobuchar, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Eva. Thanks to Marco.
So we want to start by talking about some news. There was a mass shooting, another one over the weekend. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has called for a special caucus meeting on gun violence. I mean, do you believe this is going to accomplish anything?
We have to see change. I just keep thinking of those two little girls, sisters, gunned down on a parking lot in the middle of a Saturday afternoon. You think about it, kids should be able to go to a mall in the afternoon. Kids should be able to go to their school and not be afraid they're going to be slaughtered in the classroom. Kids should be able to be kids and have the freedom to be kids. And we did get a start last year with bipartisan. There was Republicans and Democrats passed a gun safety bill, took on the NRA, but we have to do more. And to me, that means banning the purchase of these assault weapons. Minnesota is a huge hunting state. And I always say, does this hurt my Uncle Dick in the deer stand? Does he need one of these assault weapons? And he doesn't. We should do more on background checks. 80 to 90% of Americans support that. Red flag laws, which goes at the people who have severe mental illness that shouldn't be able to get a gun in certain circumstances. These things we can do. And given that we did something last year which the NRA opposed on a bipartisan basis, I think we should try again. And unless you try, you're never getting anything done.
Let's go back to the title of your book, The Joy of Politics. Is that possible? And how did you come up with the title, especially in a divided nation?
I figure America has been through so much in this last few years, whether it was the pandemic and we want to have it in our rear view mirror, but we all know that it put people in some bad places and they were really isolated, whether it's the political divisiveness, the violence, but yet we've come out the other side and we continue to persevere and move forward as a country. So my story about getting breast cancer and getting through that, my husband almost dying of COVID, it really is somewhat America's story during that time. And so that's why I thought it was really important to tell that story and talk about how in politics, there's also joy, because unless you like what you're doing and see the benefit of getting stuff done for people as joy, then why do it?
And speaking of getting stuff done, in the book you make the case for getting rid of the filibuster. Is that a reality? Is it possible?
It is getting more and more a reality as this number of senators are now supporting at least exceptions or getting rid of it, including new senator from Pennsylvania, Senator Fetterman, because it's been such a barrier. And it's so unfair. There's 160 exceptions. And what it says is you got to get 60 votes. No other democracy, big democracy in the world has this. Instead of 51 votes, you have to get 60 votes to pass anything. That makes it so hard to do anything on guns. We're 80% of the people, to codify Roe v. Wade into law, so we don't have this patchwork of laws governing women's health all over the country. You'd have to get 60 votes to do these things instead of 51. So I just make the case that it's time to at least make exceptions to it so we can allow these things to come up for a vote.
You're on the Senate Judiciary Committee. There's been a lot of questions going around Senate Supreme Court ethics, some pertaining to the undisclosed gifts to Justice Clarence Thomas. What do you think needs to happen here?
To me, it's so obvious. Every federal judge in the country, every single one of the other judges has an enforceable ethics code, which says you can't take gifts like this. Some billionaire can't send you on trips on yachts without reporting it. You cannot have your house that you partially own rehabbed and bought by someone who has an interest in cases before the court. And what happens when things like this happen, there's enforceable ethics laws. They apply to members of Congress. And I hope at some point in the very near future here, they just say, this is our ethics code and we are enforcing it. And if they don't do that, I think Congress has to step in. This isn't telling them how to decide a case, as much as I'd like to. No, it's just telling them, which we have the power to do, I believe under the Constitution, what rules of the road and operations should be in place when they go forward, because they're really losing the trust of the country by not having these enforceable ethics rules in place.
Let's talk about the deadline to raise the debt ceiling. It could come as soon as June 1st. Are you hopeful that it can get done?
It has to get done. When you look through history, under 49 Republican presidents, or 49 times under Republican presidents, we have actually voted to pay our debts, to have this strong, full faith and credit of the United States. We don't let it lapse. We don't turn our back on our debts. And that's what's so risky about what they're talking about. And so there's a big meeting that's going to be going on today. I don't know how long it'll last, but with the president and the leaders on both sides. And this is a moment where courage is not just standing by yourself yelling to your base about, hey, we're getting the other side. Courage is going to be, I believe, for the Republican leaders to say, we know every single time when Donald Trump was president, 3 times we made sure we paid our debt. And we do that, and then, yeah, let's negotiate and talk about cuts and different things we can do. Let's talk about tax changes, but that goes on the budget, which, by the way, is those negotiations are starting right now for the end of the year. We have to have a budget. They have a perfect place to have these negotiations, but not as a ransom note on the country. What will happen if this lapses? You will have interest rates going way up on mortgages, on loans. The stock market will start spiraling down. We know this happened back in 2011 when there was even a talk about defaulting on our debt, defaulting on America. That's why this meeting is so important today, and we must go forward as a country and get this done.
Senator Klobuchar of Minnesota, thank you, and good to have
Thank
you on.
you.
We appreciate it. All right, folks, don't go anywhere. We're going to have much more with Senator Klobuchar of Minnesota here on GMA3.
Including some of the revelations from the senator's new memoir, The Joy of Politics. When we come back, stay with us. Welcome back to GMA3. We are here with Senator Amy Klobuchar, author of the new book, The Joy of Politics. And in the book, you talk a lot about the challenges you faced over the last several years. The cancer diagnosis, your husband with COVID. Was it hard to go back and relive those memories?
I think it was actually a good thing to do, because when you're in the middle of them, anyone that finds out they have cancer, no matter what kind of cancer, you're just thinking to yourself, what does this mean? What kind of treatment should I have? When can I get this done? And I kind of go through how that feels for anyone. And I had to go right back in the U.S. Senate the minute I found out the diagnosis and keep going with my job. And I think for anyone, one of the best things, if there is something good that comes out of it, is I was able to then tell my story. And we got tons of letters to our office saying, you know, I had put off my mammogram, and then I went in and did it. And this one woman in particular named Melissa from Maple Grove, Minnesota, she goes, I found out I had stage 2 cancer. I'm now getting treatment. I wasn't going to do it. And then when the book is going to get done, I called this woman. I didn't know her. And I said, do you mind if I use your story? I'm just calling you by your first name. She goes, I can't believe it. You just called me. I'm in my year checkup. I'm just going in to find out if I'm okay. And of course, you can use my story, and I'll call you in a few days and tell you how I'm doing. Oh. And she was 100% good. So when I talk about joy, the goodness after everything our country has been through, that we've come out the other end, and that people have helped each other, whether it is doctors and nurses on the front end, and all that we've been through, missing funerals, weddings, losing grandma and grandpas. This is a moment where we can gather together. And it may be with people you don't always like, that you maybe didn't think you wanted to see again. But even if you have different political views, talking through these things civilly right now and discussing things that are going on, not by just looking at your phone, but looking at each other, couldn't be more important.
You give a very detailed account of the insurrection. You were at the Capitol that day, and you talk about some of the moments that, you know, stuck out to you. Is there one moment that you'll never forget?
Yeah, it was after 13 hours of the insurrection. Senator Roy Blunt, former Senator Republican of Missouri, he and I were kind of running the room where everyone else was except the 4 leaders. And it was everyone that, you know, from Ted Cruz to Bernie Sanders are in the same room. And at one point they say, clear, we can go back. We all go back. We're back in the Senate chamber. We have this debate. And then at 3:30 in the morning, it's just Roy and me, Senator Blunt and me, and Vice President Pence, with these 3 pairs of young women holding these mahogany boxes with the last of the electoral ballots up to Wyoming, making the same walk that in the morning had been this celebration, this ceremony we always do, and now we're walking by broken glass and spray-painted pillars with racist things, and we're just making this walk because we were convinced that democracy had to prevail. And we got to the House, we got those ballots counted, and it prevailed. And 2 weeks later, we had that inauguration under the beautiful blue sky, and all these people said, put it in a bunker, put it in a bunker. And we said, no way. We are not going to let the people that invaded the Capitol and went to that platform and broke those windows have the last say. We're going to go right back to where we were going to do that inauguration with people, leaders of both parties there on the stage to say, this is how we have a peaceful transition of power. And my biggest moment was remembering Lady Gaga in that incredible dress, gesturing to the flag and saying, and our flag was still there, as she sang the Star-Spangled Banner, or Amanda Gorman in her bright yellow coat talking about that we will find light, that young poet, in this never-ending shade. That's what this was about, our democracy moving forward and feeling good about our country.
In the book, you outline some of the challenges that you think that we're facing as a country, and one of the ones you point out is misinformation. You call it a public health issue. Mm-hmm. What's the solution to that?
Well, there was so many lies out there, some of it on social media, and I believe I pushed those social media platforms to do a better job of containing it, stories that weren't true about the vaccine. And there was pushback big time, including one of my favorites was Dolly Parton when she did her song to get the vaccine to the tune Jolene, her song. And so there was a lot of pushback, and in the end, I will say, you know, it was depending on how you cut the age group, you know, 70%, 80% of Americans, a lot of the seniors, vast majority of them did get the vaccine, and it saved a bunch of lives, and we know that. And so making sure that we respect that science is really important as we look at how we're going to move forward as a country, because you got to believe in science. That's how we're going to get a cure for Alzheimer's, something that my dad got in the middle of all this, late onset Alzheimer's. That's how you're going to get a cure for breast cancer and the like. So I make a strong case for science.
You also talk about your early days in politics, including a successful high school campaign.
Yes, very, very successful. I was on the high school student council, and our big job was to raise the money for the prom. And we came up with the idea of selling Lifesaver lollipops at a discounted rate that we bought in bulk. And we raised enough money, and we had this glorious prom for the seniors. We were juniors. And then when our year comes around, as often happens, an administration doesn't always keep the same standards. They didn't have enough money. We ended up at a suburban mall right near my house where I grew up, called the Ridgedale Mall, dancing around by the Woolworths and all these places. And then my date wanted to dance in the mall fountain. I didn't want to ruin my pink polyester dress. He asked another girl in this beautiful lime green dress. They went in. Everyone was cheering them on. And the chaperone, the head chaperone, the vice principal, asked me if I needed a ride home. Okay, that was a bad moment.
No.
But as I like to point out to high school students, it all turned out fine. Look where I ended up. So you can have a bad prom and move on.
I love it. You got the last laugh there.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, too, by the way. Senator Amy Klobuchar, thank you so much for being with us.
It was wonderful.
The Joy of Politics is available now wherever books are sold.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.